Well, it's a nice Sunday morning here in Idaho, and we just got back from watching the Patriot motorcycle annual rally come into the town of Mountain Home here, and I got a nice video of that, so I might put that up on the Alpine Photo Facebook group. But what I want to show you here on the Alpine today, this is for the new owners and for the old owners. And so sitting here at home, I use an old set of wood blocks that I had laying around the house. The wood is probably 15 or 20 years old at least, and it's just 1x12s and that I use. I put a double stack up under the front landing gear, as you can see, on both front landing gear, and then on my mid and on the rear levelers. And we have a lot of other junk out here that we'll talk about in a minute. I have just one stack, and that gives those feet something to sit on that's a little bit better than just sitting down on the concrete. Plus, by having these 1x2s, or excuse me, 12x2s on here on the floor, that's 2 inches less on the mid and rear levelers, that those legs are extended when my Alpine is sitting here parked, stored at the house, and about 4 inches less extension on the front landing gear. There's a lot of concern from the new owners with the Alpines with the height of the rear leveling legs, particularly. The mid levelers, some folks are also worried about that. And the concern is how low are the feet to the ground when the levelers are retracted and you're towing down the road. My levelers on this 2014, they're all set at whatever the builder did when they built this Alpine back in 2014. In 8 years of towing, I've never dragged any feet on these levelers, and I've been off-road out in the boondocks of the mountains of Idaho, Montana, Nevada, and I've been all over the west coast states, from Oregon down in Nevada, over to the Montanas, Wyoming, the Dakotas, so and here in our home state of Idaho. So let's take a couple of measurements and let's just see what the concern is on this rear clearance. And I'm going to show you a very simple way to check on your rear levelers if you're concerned with whether or not they may or may not drag the pavement. Now, one thing you've got to concern yourself about on these rear levelers, as well as you see that spare tire hanging down there, if you're coming in off of a highway road and you're making a turn, let's say you're pulling into a gas station or something like that, typically you're going to be driving coming off the road, going in to a lot of these gas stations. It's an uphill jaunt, a little curb or something, and so you want to kind of take that on an angle if you can, and that lessens the departure distance that you've got from the rear leveler legs and the spare tire down to the ground. Plus, go slow. You know, you're not in a hurry. I'm not in a hurry. And go slow when you're going, when you're pulling in off a level road up on an incline, or if there's speed bumps, things like that. Okay, so we have retracted the mid and rear leveler legs, and you can see that with mine retracted and we're down on the concrete, we have right at about 9 inches, maybe 9 1/4 inches of clearance from these rear leveler pads down to the concrete. And let's take a look at the mid leveler legs. Okay, so we're looking at my left mid leveler leg, and right next to it you'll see the sewer flush, and you can see my Valterra King Flush adapter that I leave on all the time. It never comes off. And this, we'll mention this just for a second, this external check valve right here that's on this, it prevents you from getting unwanted surprises when you take this cap off. As long as this valve is closed, if one of the three, if my black tank or one of my gray tank valves did not close all the way, which they do from time to time, this valve right here prevents me from taking a bath and having a mess when I take this cap off. So something to consider. But back to what we're talking about. We're going to measure this, and from the ground on the concrete to the bottom edge of this mid leveler leg on the left hand side, we've got 10.5 inches of ground clearance. And I have never been worried about contacting anything there. I can't measure the front landing gear because obviously I don't have the truck hooked up, but we're not worried about our clearance there. We'll discuss these mid and rear levelers. Okay, and this is old school, and this is how you look and check your departure angle on these rear leveler legs. So the rear leveler legs are completely up. And if you'll notice, I have, if I keep my hand from shaking, I have the yellow cord is running down to the rear tire, right at the bottom edge of the tire. And we'll move it so that you can see it. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to take that yellow rope, and I'm going to bring it up to the back end of this fifth wheel, to the lowest point on this fifth wheel, which is right here. There's nothing any lower than that. That's in line with those jacks. And so now what we want to do is look and see if those rear leveler jacks, when they're retracted, if they are above the yellow line. And so I'm going to zoom in here, and you can see that we've got, and I'm eyeballing it from the back of the trailer, I'm going to say that's a good 4 inches of clearance that the rear leveler leg pad is above the string. Anything that is below the string, when I have this rope at the back end, bottom edge of that left to rear tire, anything that is below this string, and we'll zoom out so that you can see from the back end of this fifth wheel, is going to hit the ground. So as you can clearly see, there's no way that that leveler leg, as it is, at the height that it's mounted at, is going to contact anything. And we could also make the same measurement on the right hand side if I wanted to. I'm not going to do that because I know I have the same exact clearance from left to right on these rear leveler jacks. So what we've just shown you is how to measure your departure angle and verify that whether or not you need to raise these rear leveler legs. There's also some discussion that I saw this morning on the group regarding, well, if I raise the rear leveler legs up, that it's not going to be able to extend far enough, and I'm going to have problems and this and that and the other. And I'll politely just say it this way, and I'm an old guy and I say things like it is. Wherever you got your information from, you're misinformed. The part numbers on the left mid and left rear leveling legs, as well as the right mid and right rear leveling legs, are exactly the same part number. There is no difference in the total length of the stroke of those cylinders. Now the front landing gear, of course, it's a different landing gear. It's got a higher capacity load. You can clearly see, if I zoom in, you can see that the exposed piston is quite a bit larger in diameter, and on this Alpine, these are 14,000 pound leveling legs on the front, and I think either 8 or 10,000 for the mid and rear. But anyways, the stroke length on the mid and rear leveling legs is exactly the same. And if I want to raise these rear leveling legs, because even though I did the string test and my leveling pads are clearly above that string, if I still didn't feel good about it, each one of these bolt holes raises the height from the ground of the lower edge of this leveling pad. When it's retracted, it raises that height 1/2 inch. And so you have 6 bolts that you'll have to take loose and lift it up and do a bolt hole up or 2 bolt holes. If I was going to move these, I'd move it up 2 bolt holes. That'd give me 1 inch extra clearance on the back. But after 8 years, I haven't hit anything, so in my case, I'm not moving them. What you do want to be concerned with is when you do take these leveling legs and raise them upwards because you decide you wanted more height, then it means the piston is going to have to travel further down to touch ground, and so that it can move the alpine up and down so that the sensors can detect movement. If this leveler leg extends to its full travel length and the forward control module on the leveling system doesn't detect any change in motion, then you're going to get what's called an out of stroke error. And all that means is what it's telling you is, hey, I tried to move down to the ground and I never could find the ground. I can't move your alpine up, and I'm not seeing any motion from the control module, therefore I'm going to error out and stop. And so to counteract for that, what most owners do is they use some kind of blocks underneath the alpine when they set up. And when we're on the road and I set up, I use these blocks, and they're handmade. They're almost 7 years old now. They're made out of 2x4s and screwed and glued. And then we used a 5/8 inch piece of marine grade plywood on top. And you can see the pattern where the pad hits at, and still have a good 2 inches all the way around so that those feet are nice and firm on a level pad. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to extend these rear leveling legs, and on this side I have one of my traveling blocks that I use when we're on the road. And when we measure this, you can see that it's a good 4.5 inches above the ground, versus if I was using this, my wood that I use at home, we're about 1.75 inches. So with that being said, with this 4.5 inches of block that we have, that's 4.5 inches less that these internal pistons need to extend. And so your overall alpine is going to be much more level if you use something like this that's at least, I'd say, 4 to 6 inches tall. Now there are going to be cases where you're going to get in some really weird campground, and it'll probably happen primarily on the front landing gear, and I've had it happen with me a couple of times. You'll get to a place to where the site is off level enough front to back that you'll have hardly any extension on the front landing gear. And so I do carry two 12-inch wide by 2-inch thick pieces of wood to use on those landing gears in case I were to run into an issue with an RV site that was really unlevel. So we're going to go ahead and extend these gears so you can see the difference in the exposed pistons, and we'll do that and we'll be right back with you. Okay, so now we have extended the mid and rear leveling legs, and as you can see I have one of my traveling blocks that I carry with me. And so this pad on the foot is, it doesn't have to extend as far because of this nice block. And so if we look at our overall extension on that cylinder on this side, we're going to call it 5.5 inches of exposed cylinder extension. Now let's go look at the right rear side, and where I'm using just my normal blocks at home, and you'll see that there's a difference. So again, we've got, we'll call it 5.5 inches of extension on this rear piston. And now we're on the right rear, and I have the short block underneath of it, and you can see that that piston is extended almost 9 inches. So with this piston being extended this much more, and there's still more travel on it that it could have come down, what that does is the weight that's on this is got a longer fulcrum point on it, and so your fifth wheel is going to tend to want to move and shake if you've got a lot of extension. And so that's why we're using the shorter or the thicker blocks on the other side, and you can see that you know, there's almost 4 inches less extension on that side, and it's going to be much more stable. And that's what you want to use on all 6 leveling legs. I recommend 4.5 to 6 inches thick blocks. Some people are buying the nice Anderson level up blocks that they make, but I'm an old retired guy, and so I got to watch my nickels and dimes that don't go as far as they used to, and so I do it the old way with wood and stuff. One other thing that I want to show you, and I think is absolute junk, and it's a waste of money, is these leveling blocks made by Lynx. Now, I had these off of our last toy hauler, and they were okay, but I'll show you why I don't like them. What I've done is laid 2 of these Lynx stackable blocks on top of my blocks that I carry. You can clearly see the difference in the width. They'll fit underneath the pads sit on top of here, but honestly I don't like the metal on these leveler pads sitting on this plastic. And yes, you know, I could take and you know, we could get probably 4 of them and stack it up, and we would get the same height that we have here. Yeah, 4 gives us the same height as one of my blocks, but you know, you're spending money for that. The wood, in my opinion, works well. These have held up for 6 years, and there's no cracking after 6 years, which I'm very pleased with. And they'll do the job. I've got rope handles on them so that they're very easy. When I want to pick them up, I just grab it like that, and I can carry 2 of them at a time, or I can carry 4, but we'll grab 2. I mean, I'm doing that with 3 fingers and picking it up. And there, you know, I could throw them in the back of the truck, and when I get someplace and I'm ready to start leveling, I just take and toss it underneath there, and I can wiggle it around and get it where my leveling leg is, and I'm done. If it's raining out or it's muddy or the wind's blowing, I'm not sitting out there playing around with these stupid plastic stackable things. So I do not recommend buying these plastic stackables at all. And we'll wrap this up. It's starting to get warm here now. The sun is out behind the clouds, but and now I got a mess to pick up. But the wife said, "What on earth are you doing now?" And I told her, "I'm just trying to show you folks, give you folks some ideas, and set your mind at rest. Get a piece of string, have the wife hold one end of it down at the bottom of that rear tire, and stretch it out straight up underneath the back end of that Alpine to the lowest point at the rear bumper area there. And if you level the legs when they're retracted, if they're above that line, you ain't got nothing to worry about. If you want to move them up 2 bolt holes, there's more than enough room vertically up underneath there to move all 4 of those. If you want to move the mid and the rear leveling legs up, you can move them up 1 bolt hole, 2 bolt holes. I wouldn't go any more than 2. There's just no need for it, but you know, that's a choice you as the owner will have to make. And again, the part numbers that are used for the mid and rear leveling legs are identically the same. They have exactly the same travel length on them, and you won't have any issues if you raise those rear leveler legs up 2 bolt holes. Then that means that chrome piston that you can see here in the picture, we'll zoom in on it since I'm sitting over in the shade, and it just means that piston is going to extend more. And so to counteract for that, get you some nice leveling blocks. If you got the money and you like those Anderson blocks, those are nice and easy to store. Or if you're a bit of a handyman like me, you can make these blocks up that I've made and make them out of 2x4s and a piece of 5/8. You could probably go to 1/2 inch plywood. And some folks that have asked me about them have said, well, you know, this is our home. We don't have a home like you do. We don't have a wood shop, and so we don't have any way to get that made. Well, yeah, actually you do. If you go into a Home Depot or Lowe's, they've all got saws back there, and they will cut the wood that you buy to the lengths that you want. And so for an example, if I wanted to make these up and I didn't have a saw of any sorts, I could simply go in there and buy 2x4, whatever length I needed, depending on the width that I was going to make these pads. and buy a piece of, usually they have scrap plywood, so you don't have to buy a whole sheet. And at today's prices, they're asking solid gold for wood lately. But anyways, you can get the top piece cut to the dimensions that you like, and get the 2x4s cut, and then all you need is some good exterior wood glue, and I used 3-inch long or 3 or 4-inch long wood screws, and countersunk them just a little to get the heads down, and screwed them in, and the project was done. And I had some old ski rope laying around. It just happens to be purple in color, so that's what I used for handles. I guess if somebody's interested and wants to know, well, how big did I make these? I made them 11.5 by 11.5. And I have 3 2x4s across here, and then 2x4s on the end. And then you can see where I went in with the wood screws and countersunk them so that they're flush. So it's a very simple construction. They've been in use for 7 years, and they don't crack. Your alpine weight is, I guarantee you, if you want to get technical, which I did with this, there's a calculator, and you can look at the spacings on this versus the length and the width of this wood, and these blocks will support a load PSI rating of about 18,000 pounds for each one of these, so if you wanted to get technical. So we'll wrap it up. Hopefully that gives you a little more information on your leveling system. Seems like that's all I've been talking about here lately on the last couple of videos, is the leveling system. But trying to help folks out, the new folks, the old folks, and some folks that got information that in my opinion is not factually correct. When I tell you something or video something, I try to give you the facts, and I try to give you the facts based off of what I know from my experience, what I know from owning RVs for over 40 years, and also I check my opinions and things that I video and say, I check those against the specs and the manuals and stuff. So I try to give you the most accurate information. But that's all we got from Idaho to here today. It's going to get about 105, so I need to get this mess picked up, and hopefully this video will be useful to somebody.